love this question so much that I want to start with it. Where do I begin when I want to change the undesirable behavior of a child with autism?
That's a great question. It's a beautiful general question.
Yeah.
So a behavior is undesirable. I assume that it is something that's challenging. So in other words, it's either a tantrum or aggression or I don't know, it's something that is just not appropriate and is challenging because it's not appropriate for that environment or time or setting. So what you would generally do is you would ask the question, why is this behavior occurring? That's the first thing that you want to do in ABA always, in dealing with behavior change. Why is this behavior occurring? Now, it might be from your perspective that the behavior is occurring for a particular reason. You might look at a behavior and say, oh, he's just doing that to be obstinate, or he's just doing that because he's attention seeking, whatever it is. But that's not necessarily, our opinions are not necessarily always accurate. So there's a procedure that we do in behavior analysis called a functional behavior assessment, and there's different forms of this. But regardless, what the procedure is you answer a series of questions. If it's an indirect functional assessment, which is probably what you want to start with, you will answer a series of questions, and this will give you an idea of what the function of the behavior is. In other words, why is the behavior occurring? If those questions become confusing and you still can't answer those questions, and by the way, those questions you can find on two places, I guess, skillsforautism.com. If you go into the skills website, you'll find a link to CIFA, which stands for Card Indirect Functional Assessment. And that's where you'll answer those questions. It asks you things like, when does the behavior occur, under what very specific circumstances, and once you answer all those very specific circumstances, it helps us identify, or the system, the computer program, will identify for you all the possible functions. Now, functions are generally of two types, and they break down into more. So when we do a behavior, we're either trying to avoid something or gain something. That's always the case. Now, you can avoid a situation, you can avoid failure, you can avoid a demand, you can avoid having to do something. And what you can gain an object, you can gain free time, you can gain attention, absolutely. You can gain somebody's negative attention by upsetting them. So there's something you want to gain, or there's something you want to avoid, or it's both, okay? And it's very, very important that you find that out. Now, if you are not able to do it through an indirect functional assessment, which is that questionnaire, then you have to have a BCBA, board-certified person, come and do what's called a direct functional assessment, where they set up scenarios and they provoke the behavior so that they can actually identify what's coming right before it, what's the antecedent, and how is it being maintained by whatever the consequences. So when all that is said, and if that doesn't work, there's a third step, which is an experimental FBA, which is something a BCBA can also do, but not really always necessary. So you've identified the function of the behavior, and now your intervention will depend on that. So I'll give you some examples. For instance, a child will hit someone in order to get an object they want, right? So a child's playing with another child, and they'll hit and push the other child because they want to grab a toy that the child has. That's a tangible function. That means the child is doing the challenging behavior of hitting in order to gain access to something which is a tangible object. So the way that you would intervene with that is that you would prevent the child from gaining access. See, again, I'll go back to Shannon. What I've said many times is that all challenging behavior is a form of communication. So essentially, when the child hits another child to get access to something, if they had the appropriate language and had been taught, they would be saying, "Can I have that, please?" Yeah. Right? So what you do is you make sure that the child learns that this form of communication, hitting isn't effective anymore. So you can hit, but you're not going to get that object anymore. And if you do that, then the child will stop hitting because it's not useful anymore to them to get their object, because the reason they were hitting was to get an object. Now, if the reason they were hitting was to get attention, and there are a lot of kids where they'll hit you and look at you, or hit someone and look at like their sibling and look at the adult, that's attention seeking. And if that's the case, obviously you don't want to give attention. However, if you don't want to give attention, but you also don't want the child to hit the other child. So you have to block the behavior. You have to prevent it from happening. And then that becomes very difficult because by preventing it, you're automatically giving attention to it. So there's numerous types of interventions for each of the functions that I listed. And the best way for you to be able to handle this, instead of me giving a 2-hour lecture here, is to actually, if you go to CIFA, which is on the skills website, you will then be connected after you answer the CIFA. It'll take you to what's called a BIP builder, and that's Behavior Intervention Plan. So once the CIFA helps you identify the reason, the function of the behavior, then it connects you to the BIP builder, which will tell you all the different interventions you can do for that particular behavior. And you'll get a whole list of options. So there's many different things you can do for each behavior, but most importantly, you first have to identify why it's happening. A long response.
But I want you to know how life-changing it is when you start to look at it this way. We had somebody who wrote in last week who was talking about her neurotypical, very smart 8-year-old was starting to use ABA again on mom and putting mom on extinction. And she wrote back in this week and said, "Thank you so much for the advice on my ABA smart neurotypical 8-year-old. The tables have turned."
Excellent.
And she said she is now put on extinction and we have much better compliance.
Excellent.
And she says, "Thank you for giving us a happier home. I have more energy and sanity to work on all things autism."
That's fantastic. Yeah, identifying the function of things is pretty amazing. Like, you know, and it's very, very hard. We don't do enough of this when we're in the middle of it. Like, you know, I live and breathe this stuff, but I would say that in many circumstances, when my own kids were young, especially my last kid, I wasn't necessarily thinking, what is the function of this behavior, you know? So there was although it was in my nature to not let challenging behavior occur, but it still is really, really useful to identify the function, because sometimes you just get upset about something, and once you realize that what the function is, and you realize that the child doesn't yet have a replacement skill or a way to to make that communication, or whatever it is they're trying to communicate, you get less frustrated and you learn to teach the skill before you start to block the behavior.
It is amazing. I will say that the first step for me is always that what we were talking about, that behavior is communication, recognizing that.
Always.
Even, was it yesterday, the day before yesterday, my son was in a snit.
Yes.
This was in a snit, and we sat down to do homework, and he was just in that place. And I was getting in a snit, and it was about to go downhill fast. And in that moment, I did have a moment of clarity and sanity, and I thought, what is he trying to communicate to me? Instead of focusing on, why is he, stop doing that kind of thing, it was, what is he trying to communicate to me? And then that shifted my whole being.
Right.
I dealt with what I felt that he was trying to communicate to me, and we didn't have the tantrum.
Right. And also,
I don't do that always.
And you have to remember that it's also, this is not just with our kids, right? I mean, this is with our spouses, our bosses, our coworkers, anybody in life. You always, if someone is yelling, which would be considered an inappropriate or challenging behavior, they're trying to communicate something very drastically. Yeah. So most of the time, anything that we do that's a challenging behavior is always a form of communication.
Yep. Absolutely. So, and once we start to look at it, then we're empowered to take steps. So great. I'm going to move on to the question that we had on Facebook. Hi, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. What is considered a high-functioning kid? My 4.5-year-old uses 5 to 6 words in his sentences to request or when trying to tell us something else, but it's not conversational. He has a few sensory issues, but nothing too crazy. Scripting is one of them, plus always seeking sensory by crashing into furniture, his brothers, etc. But he's really smart and learns quickly. 2 years ago, he barely said a few words, and now he has tons of words. And even though he's made so much progress in these 2 years, I still don't know if he's high functioning now. When he first got the label, the neurodevelopmental doctor said he was considered to be moderate on the spectrum, and thanks so much.
I would say you can consider him pretty high functioning at this level because, 4, 5, 6 words, phrases, even if they're not conversational, even if they're just requests, that's a lot of language. Language is usually a good indication of how far the child can continue to progress. But, I think 4-year-old, 5-year-old?
4.5.
Yeah, you need to seriously hit the books right now. Like, when I feel very passionate about every single one of my kids, but I feel like the ones that are young, like 4.5, you're kind of, you're past 3, you're not, it's not 5 yet, but you're past 3. So I need you to really seriously get involved with skills today. Because your child needs to learn that conversational skill or skills, because your child, you'll be pretty shocked if you go on skills. You may have already gone on skills, and if it seems complicated to you, then please stay in touch with us and we can help you with that. We also have people that's in skills whose job it is to help people get familiarized with how to use it, the user access. But please use it, because your child will, once you answer the assessment, you'll see how many different things you have to teach. And you don't have a lot of time. You have maybe another couple of years to teach a lot of stuff. So hit the books, get skills going, hire some people or get insurance or go to a BCBA, go to an agency. You are the family that needs to do pretty intensive intervention right now. And the older your child gets, the harder it'll be to get your child intervention hours, because people will say the window has closed and all this sort of stuff. It just gets very hard to get funding for kids after age 7 or so. So it's very, very important for you to really get intensive ABA right now. You can either do it with an agency that is in network with insurance, or you can do it yourself with the help of a BCBA if you can afford it. There's many options, and I urge you to please go heavily, because your child does sound like he would have a lot of potential.
And this week's, every week we feature a different episode of the A Word, and this particular week's A Word, they show you how they're taking, Jack Riley was doing 1 word and then he was doing 2 word, and they're just broadening his language, and it's the big discussion of this week's episode. So at the start of the next hour, you'll see that episode and you can watch it on YouTube. We had a big discussion about that yesterday, because a lot of people write into us, Dr. Granpeesheh, and talk about their children, whether they're age 3, 5, 17, or 18.
Yes.
And they've been at school, and it's like at school, what the aides were taught was the first lesson, which is doing labeling. And then they never broaden the language. And I had made the point yesterday, that's where curriculum comes in. And we weren't all born knowing what the curriculum is, but it's available to you. It's all there on skills. You'll know what lessons to
plus,
teach.
and our book just came out, so it's also in our book. I mean, if you look at our book, Evidence-Based Treatments for Children with Autism, at the end of it, it's a massive index of lessons. It doesn't describe the lessons, but it lists them for you, and you can go to skills and see each one. But my point is that there's a lot to teach, even just getting a child to converse. And that's one lesson in skills, as conversation. One lesson area will consist of everything from, recognizing whether it's an acquaintance or a friend, recognizing the environment, because all of those factors influence what your conversation is, right? Do I speak informally or formally, loud, soft, with what type of manner? Is it appropriate to speak right now? Your setting, your audience, all of that. And then how do I initiate a conversation? How do I respond appropriately? How do I take turns so that I'm allowing the other person to converse? What are the things I want to talk about? Do I pay attention to the other person's body language? So are they interested in what I'm talking about? What do I do if the person isn't interested? How do I repair the conversation? What signs tell me this person is about to walk away? I mean, there's a million little sub-lessons going into just one thing, which is conversation, social conversation. So, don't waste time.
Just one last thing, parent to parent, because I understand why you want to know, is he high functioning? I totally get that.
Right.
But here's what I want to challenge you with, is that what will motivate you more? We, at one point, stopped saying that Jem had autism because I wanted to be as a positive, assumptive as I possibly could. So I would say, our son is recovering from autism. And it wasn't true every single day and every single moment,
Right.
because sometimes he was, he would have a little step backwards. Didn't matter. That was the language that I used because that's where we were going. That's what we we're going to do.
That's awesome.
If that's not you, but I'm saying to you, what will motivate you the most? If it's going to motivate you the most to say he is high functioning and we are doing this, say that.
Yes.
Set your own bar.
Yes.
And do what
Absolutely.
you need to do. Because really, it's in this world of autism, it's about write your own ticket as a parent.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's stressful, but when we rise to the occasion, it's not. And so what will help you to write that ticket in the way that you need it written?
Yeah, very well put. Very well put. And, high functioning or low functioning is definitely a subjective matter. There is no, line above which you are high functioning or low functioning. It doesn't work that way. I always say our kids may start out as extremely severe, and if they have the right intervention, obviously their diagnosis will change and eventually disappear. And so every child has the potential to become high functioning. It's just a matter of how much is put into the instruction, how well it's done, how early it's done, how intensely it's done, how you deal with other issues that the child has, like making sure he sleeps well, doesn't have allergies, all this sort of stuff. So it's a pretty comprehensive, program, but you're in a good place to start now.
Absolutely.
Or get involved.
And write back to us and let us know how things are going. So this one came in during the night. My son is entering high school next year, and we were told that he will have to attend the IEP to advocate for himself. Is this true? We haven't told him of his ASD diagnosis. We struggle with telling him. Good for him to understand himself and be able to research on his own, but on the other hand, don't want him to feel bad or use the diagnosis as an excuse. And they said, thank you.
How old?
Starting high school next year.
No, he does not have to attend. That's number one.
And we're going to have a legal expert in the next hour, too, who can talk to you about those IEP things as well.
Yeah.
But I've never heard of a state where they would require that this.
No.
I know that they will allow the student to be there, but I've never heard of them requiring it.
No, you are, until he's 18 at least, you are definitely his representative, so he does not have to attend. It sounds like he's very, very high functioning, and I guess it's a double-edged sword with our very, very high functioning kids. You got to be very careful with this, because on the one hand, you don't want the individual to feel stigmatized or to use it as an excuse, as you mentioned. But on the other hand, you also want them to forgive themselves, I suppose, not to blame themselves for not being able to do certain things right at that moment. I find some of my children become pretty depressed and or anxious, highly depressed, concerningly depressed, sometimes when they hit adolescence, and especially in high school, because they're extremely high functioning, and believe it or not, they get bullied still to this day, which I find shocking, but or they're just avoided, they don't have friends, there's all sorts of stuff, and that is pretty difficult for kids, and it's depressing, and please, and that's often what leads to our kids failing academically and just becoming avoidant and all that sort of stuff. So if that sort of stuff is going on, please pay attention to it. Start to give your child both some training in terms of teaching him or her how to perceive others' actions, how to handle failure, how to get through tough times, things they can do to cope, all of that. And then also please help your child engage in other things wherein they're positive for them, wherein they're successful, maybe outside activities outside of the school, maybe in the school. Just make sure your child has something that they're passionate about, that they're good at, because anyone who doesn't have some direction and some support, which means, some activity as well as some friends, will get depressed.
Yeah, high school is the hardest thing in the world.
It really is.
And
I'm just like, my kids are, going through high school, and thank God they're doing okay, but I'm all over their lives, like very involved with their lives.
And I think it bears repeating that it's hard for all kids, not just kids on the autism spectrum.
Oh, yeah.
But it seems like the current, we've seen all these studies about what helps our kids, and what helps is for them to have a circle of friends and to have something that they're good at, the thing that you're talking about. Right. By the way, while I'm thinking about it, there's a study right now, and we did an interview with them where they're studying having they want to have 2,000 parents participate in talking about how they tell their children what their fears are. You can participate in that. It's called the Elephant in the Room Project, and you can search for it in our videos to talk about that.
That's cool.
Yeah, because they want to be able to come back to all of us and say, here's what overwhelmingly parents said worked well when telling the individual, and here's what didn't work out so well.
This project?
And I, unfortunately, we did the interview, and I can't pull it up out of my head right now which university it is, but it's Elephant in the Room. We'll look for it during the next break. Okay, so Kelby's going to help us to find that. But we did the interview just a couple of weeks ago, and of course my brain I just cannot access which university.
That's so cool. That's great.
It is amazing. But Elephant in the Room Project. And but we know that getting them involved with something where they have some currency, and this is for all kids, but there was a study that was done at UC Santa Barbara about getting kids involved in a club or good at.
Yeah, absolutely.
That gives them a circle of friends. It gives them currency within the other kids, because in high school, if you aren't, there's either you need to be exactly like everybody else, or you need to have your special difference.
Yes.
And when we allow our kids to have some other difference, it allows them to be different in general.
Absolutely right.
So I love that advice about giving them something that they're good at. The University of Calgary in Canada is doing the Elephant in the Room project. Thank you, Kelby, for looking that up for it. University of Calgary in Canada. Okay, so I'm going to move on to another question that we have here. Hi guys, how can I my 4-year-old get my 4-year-old to be more calm and not always on the go? The only time he's calm and still is when he's writing in his notebook. He loves letters, and he likes to write words in a notebook. Some that can be read and some not. But he is calm when doing this. He can sit and write anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour, and I love how still he is during this time. But I would rather he play with toys and be calm than writing so many times during the day. His toy interest is limited. He'll play with some toys for maybe a few minutes, and most of the time it's because I almost make him by telling him, if you play with your toys for a few minutes, you can watch the credits of movies. He loves watching them after a movie is finished, and then he'll play with the toys. Thank you, guys.
So I'm just going to give you some very general advice, but there's a million different things that I want to say to you, but I can't because we don't have time, and I don't know your child very well. But I love kids who are hyperlexic. I think the kids who are writers and readers and like letters tend to do very, very well. So I really love them because they're very unique. I think they're unique in the way that their brain is organized. It's fascinating for me. What I would do right off the bat as a general response is basically I would start to have a trade-off type situation, so that it's basically called Premack principle. So you allow the child, you will let the child do a series of things that he doesn't really want to do, actually this is just reinforcement theory rather than Premack. So just set up, let's say, in a, 10 minutes period of time, or let's say in an hour. Let's say an hour you're starting with, because he sounds very capable of keeping himself going for a long period of time. So let's say for a time frame of an hour, you'll do about, you will set up you must do this for him visually so that he can see what's happening on a schedule. So you'll say, until the first buzzer, and you'll use maybe a timer, and you write it out, we're going to do something, I don't know, some other activity. How old is the child? Whatever 4. Is appropriate. So
4.
He's 4. So let's say puzzles. So you'll do puzzles for 10 minutes, and then or maybe even 5 minutes, and then you'll do, double that time frame writing. Okay, so 5 minutes of puzzle, 10 minutes of writing. And then you'll do 5 minutes of some other activity like playing with a toy, which, by the way, if he's playing alone, it has to have some form of completion because he won't be able to do pretend play yet. So playing with a toy or another object, and then another 10 minutes of the reinforcer, which is writing. So, and you'll structure things that way so that it's short blobs of time doing the things you want him to do, followed by slightly longer time frames where he's getting to do the thing that is very reinforcing to him. And then over time, over the course of, let's say, the next month, you'll reverse that schedule so that you'll gradually increase the time frame where he's doing the thing you want him to do, like playing with a toy or other things, and decrease the reinforcer time frame, but don't decrease it to a point where it becomes meaningless, right? So he's really reinforced by writing. Writing is a pretty appropriate form of activity for him. It's in fact above his age. So he's always going to like letters. So he's going to like writing, reading. He's going to like books. Read to him, take his reward and make it more appropriate. One of my kids who loved numbers, I got him into Sudoku, and he was very much into that. He likes letters, great. Get him into those word search things, teach him that. Teach him other types of activities that involve letters, because that's a reinforcing thing for him. There's nothing wrong with it. I prefer it to be more functional rather than repetitive. Right now, he is doing it probably more repetitive because he doesn't know how to use them. So you really need to teach him actually copying words and how to make words, into sentences, and how to then start describing things with writing. I mean, I'm telling you a lot of information which might confuse you. So again, I would really suggest that you get an ABA program in place, that you use Skills. Skills has, several hundred ideas of how everything we teach in Skills has a visual option, so that you can teach it to a child who's completely a visual learner. It sounds like he really is more of a visual learner. So, there's a lot of things you can do to get him to do other activities, but in addition to that, I think you have a child with a particular skill and you need to develop that skill.
Yeah.
It's a really cool skill, and it'll help him all the way through life, because he'll learn language with it. He'll learn all kinds of stuff using written word.
Yeah, it's a concern for mom, but it's kind of a quality problem.
It's a wonderful
that needs to be
problem
challenged.
To have. Yeah, absolutely.
That you channeled. That's the word I want. It needs to be channeled,
yeah,
and then you're going to see amazing things.
Channeled and developed, even. Yes. And so don't let it frighten you. I understand you don't want it to become repetitive in nature. The only reason it is kind of repetitive, like looking at the credits of a movie and stuff, it's only because he or she is hyperlexic, so kids who are hyperlexic, they like letters, and you have to give him other ways of using that.
And I even wonder about, because the way that when credits go, the way that they make patterns and shapes, and Jem likes to look at credits too, and we like to pick out names out of the credits. There's an element of it that I know from friends that code computers, that there's something about the way that it scrolls with the letters that it's like coding. Yeah. So you might have somebody who'll be very interested in computers.
I know, I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Because you can clearly see that with coding. Like if you've ever watched a programmer, like they'll type in a bunch of stuff and hit a button, and then the whole screen starts to go letters in different patterns, and that is very self-stimulatory. It's pretty cool visually.
Yeah.
But I mean, these are great. He'll become a programmer.
Yeah.
These are all awesome things. Yeah.
And there are all kinds of things, even for little ones. If there's a program called Scratch that you can find on that teaches 4-year-olds how to program for a computer in a language called Scratch. It's amazing. Okay. So next question. They write in, "Hi, I know you're not doctors, but you are a doctor, but I think they mean medical doctors, and I'm neither. So, but my 4-year-old keeps having problems with constipation. He eats a pretty high fiber diet, but gets constipated easily. I have gone to the pediatrician, GI, and they have recommended Miralax, which hurts his stomach. I tried magnesium, but he gets really gassy and it hurts his stomach. I know this is affecting his learning and attention and sleep, of course, but we just can't seem to figure it out. We have seen a MAPS doctor in South Florida too, but they didn't help us as they recommended Miralax 2 and a fiber powder that hurts his stomach. If you have any ideas, please help, and thank you so much.
You know, I really would suggest that if you've tried these various things, I would suggest that you do see a physician. Possibly you would want to see a gastroenterologist at this point, because a lot of our kids have constipation issues. It is a pretty important thing to be looking at. If it was me, I would go next to really balancing his nutrition, because what we eat obviously has a lot to do with the consistency of our bowel movements. So it's very important that you make sure that you're not giving him things that are causing the constipation or contributing to it. And also, there are particular things that you can do with his diet that would help the constipation situation. One very simple thing is the time frame between meals affects constipation pretty significantly. So, you know, I would really consult with a nutritionist, and then I would go see a gastroenterologist. A very good nutritionist that we work with is Julie Matthews. And you can certainly look on her website.
NourishingHope.com.
Right. And there are many good nutritionists. Please find one in your area. This is very, very important. And otherwise,
but Julie will do long distance consultation
Julie will
too.
Absolutely.
So,
and of course, we at CARD, we have Dr. Linda Copeland, who also has been or will be working with Julie and learning all of her protocols as well. And Dr. Copeland is a developmental pediatrician, and she also is a board-certified behavior analyst, the BCBA. So I'm sure she would be able to consult as well. Although I don't know if she's doing out-of-state consults just yet.
Okay.
But I was just thinking that we should also set up and have Dr. Copeland on your show pretty regularly.
Yes, we've already done that, actually. Okay. So she's going to be a semi-regular. That we're going to have her Skyping in from different places. I already begged for that, and she said yes. So, and of course, you know, you've listed all these things and you've done all these things, but the only thing that I don't see on here that, of course, I'm going to ask, and of course you probably have already looked at this, but if I don't, I'll be awake tonight worrying about it. Have you done a probiotic, and how much water is the child drinking?
Right.
I mean, sometimes it's the simple things. So you probably have already done that, and forgive me for asking it, but you didn't say it, so I'm just throwing it out there.
Absolutely. But you know, I mean, sometimes it is just about getting the right combination, the right, I guess, proportions of fiber and liquid. I mean, if you get the right proportion of fiber and water, and then you have a stool softener in place, you should be good to go. If you're not, that means there's a pretty significant amount of inflammation, and you need to be talking to a nutritionist first, who will help reduce the inflammation by particular diets, and then a GI physician who will go further if necessary.
Okay, somebody just wrote in and said, hello, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. I wanted to share with you a good thing that just happened with my daughter. She is also hyperlexic, and she had always had a fascination with numbers. Now she is able to guess how old you will be at any year and point in time. And she says, thanks to skills for her progress and your love and care, and love you all. And they're writing from Florida. We love you too.
That's wonderful. That's pretty cool.
So
that's
absolutely
awesome.
Love that. This is one on our live feature. My ASD son sometimes responds without digesting the information. He would agree to anything and can easily be guided towards answers. How do we teach him to listen and think first before answering? It happens more when he has poor focus. We do some rapid fire questions with obvious answers, which he answers correctly, but in brain foggy moments, he would be the perfect yes man and the perfect fall guy. And please advise and thank you. It's concerning.
Yeah, it is concerning. And I think it's two different issues here. I'm not sure if I'm understanding it correctly, but I think we're talking about processing speed and about assertiveness. So they're a little bit different. So in terms of, I hope I'm getting it right here, but in terms of processing speed, I mean, I think what you need to do is actually, instead of doing rapid fire questions, is to teach him just to time like, in other words, not allow him to respond until a buzzer goes off.
Okay.
Or until the first, 10 seconds after a question is asked. You determine what's appropriate. But, like, for instance, I will say, I don't know, what's the capital of France? And before you answer, then I'd want you to think for 5 seconds. So I would actually give you the rule, don't answer until 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. And he could be looking down at a second hand on his watch while he's thinking. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing, is to like slow him down and so that his accuracy goes up. And then, of course, you can increase the complexity of the questions. But the other issue is more about assertiveness and being able to dispute something that others say, or not to be the fall guy, or the person that will agree with everything. And in that case, I think there's many different things you could do to teach assertiveness, and there is actually a program for assertiveness training in skills. But I would begin with probably right or wrong scenarios, and I would very critically teach those. I would say, these are the things that you never agree with, these are the things, so make it black and white. See, a lot of times for our kids, what becomes difficult is just the gray, sort of what is, yes, we don't lie, but that's a definite no. But then in certain circumstances, it's better to lie. Mm-hmm. And I think that you will probably want to first establish the rules, and then help your child identify kind of where they become murky and what are the options when they become gray rules. And then you can exercise those, I suppose, practice those. A third issue that could be happening here is just the speed. Just you alluded to the fact that he tends to get lost or confused when it's
brain
too fast
foggy.
Or when he's... Yeah, so try to identify what that's about. Like, why does he have time frames where he's kind of foggy? In the past, when parents have talked to me about that and have used that word, it's often is kids who have yeast problems, and they tend to kind of become like spaced out for periods of time. Other times, so you want to find out if he has issues with that, with yeast. The other issues that could be, is he getting enough sleep? Sometimes that's become a very important issue. Is he just has inattentiveness, in which case you should reevaluate his diagnosis. Maybe he has inattentive form of ADHD, which would be important to know. Is he distracted? Is he, thinking about some other thing? Find out what the reason is for that fogginess. It could have, is he on other medications? The other day I saw a child who was on a ton of different supplements. Mm-hmm. And but throughout the intake or the process that I was seeing him, I thought, God, this child is just like extremely lethargic, and there's got to be something going on with all of these supplements. So I asked Mom to send me like the accurate list of all the supplements and the amounts, and I sent it to Dr. Copeland, and she wrote back and she says like 6 things on here that all together could cause significant lethargy. And this is probably one of those situations where things have been gradually added by different doctors or by mom and doctors, and they're not aware of the fact that they're interacting with each other in a very negative way. So, it's important to look at why the individual becomes foggy, because that is probably the most important thing here.
Okay, great advice. I'm going to go on to the next question. Hi, Dr. Doreen and Shannon. Love your show. My 4.5-year-old just started a typical preschool. I'm having a hard time setting up play dates. I don't know how to approach if I should explain my son's condition. He has a language delay and social skills delay. He sometimes will copy other kids' speech, and other kids don't like it because they think he's teasing them. He does like the reaction they give him, but he also learns that way. My ABA therapist would like to come on the play date, so how do I explain to them and about what is happening with him? I would like to give them as little details as possible. One of the moms told me her son said, my son has people come with him to school speech therapist, OT, and ABA. She asked why, and I was caught off guard. I simply told her they are helping him with his writing. I told her his speech too. I probably would not have said as much, but this kid happens to play with my son, and I would like to set up a play date. How do I handle these questions now that he is in a typical preschool? It's a great question. And then she does continue on. She says he's in a typical setting, and other parents see his helpers in class. I have social anxiety myself and see a therapist because this is causing me more anxiety trying to help my son with his social skills. And thank you for your guidance with this.
Yes, I can imagine that it is causing you anxiety. It is anxiety provoking for us when our kids go through hard times, especially at a very early age. He's really young, and my recommendation would be that you do disclose and that you do talk with the other parents and the other children, in fact, and the teachers and everyone. The reason I say that is that if it's at the point where he has an aide with him all the time, sooner or later parents are going to figure out something's going on, and so will teachers if they already haven't. But kids at that age are actually pretty kind. They're not at the age yet where they start to bully or be mean, and you can use them as allies to some extent. So I would talk to the other children. It's not about the label. I think it would be important to give a presentation at some point and say, he needs help with some things in language. This is how you guys can help. He needs help with his friends and so on. This is how you guys can help. And I have found kids very young, kindergarten, even through all of elementary, to be pretty compassionate when it comes to things like this, and I would really actually bring them on board and get them involved with how to help and how to be friends and what things they can do, especially if they're, I've found there are older girls, like maybe a year or two older girls, are usually love to take our young boys and teach them and take them around and model for them and so on and so forth. And I would maybe even set up some sort of a game at school, like who can do more of whatever with your child, or who becomes his best friend or something like that, because you really will have a lot more support. And at that point, I think that the other parents might feel, if their children are comfortable with your child, they'll be comfortable. And I think that the other parents become, I guess, hesitant to do play dates because they don't know enough about ASD. When they don't know the truth, they can't trust you, and if they can't trust you, they won't let their child come over for a play date. It's really that simple. And if they know more, and if they learn that, and let's face it, there's so much ASD in our society now that everybody will probably know other children who are on the spectrum, and and then it's just a matter of treating it like a language disability or a reading delay or whatever it is. It's just several of those. That's all it is.
Yeah. And I think, there's always the fear, and especially if you're having anxiety, it's a fearful thing, but sometimes it's just so much easier to say it. If somebody, in the unlikely event that somebody reacts negatively, you know what that does? It saves you a whole lot of time, because you didn't want your child playing with their child anyway, because they were going to say things that weren't going to be good for your child.
Correct.
So mostly what you're going to get is good stuff, and then they're going to be more helpful to you. And then let us know how that goes. We're almost out of time, so I'm going to squeeze in this last little question. I have a question for Dr. Granpeesheh for the show in the morning. This came in on our Facebook. Could you please ask her about transitioning and employment for ASD teens and adults, and to talk about the CARD program for teens and adults in more detail? I have additional questions. Who would be the best person to contact?
That's terrific. And you ask me this when I have 30 seconds left to respond.
I know, I'm cruel. It's horrible, but I wanted to squeeze it in. We can talk more about it in 2 weeks.
So we're very, very engaged now with our teens and adults, and specifically with regards to several different areas. Of course, we work on safety, and we work on adaptive skills, so chores and things that are important. We work on community skills, so how to get around and how to interact and so on. But our biggest, emphasis right now is vocational. So we start to really prepare our teens and adults for jobs, and we connect them to jobs, actually, and then we teach them all the stuff they need for this, like how to get on public transportation information to go to the job, or if they're at a higher level, how to put together a resume, whatever it is. So we're heavily involved with that, and it's a big, big passion of ours right now. So please, if you are interested in that program, don't we have contact information on our website? The person
Absolutely.
We do, right?
On the centerforautism.com, you can go there, and there's one of the tabs, one of the rotating tabs, is additional services for teens and adults.
Okay. And, feel free to please send your email or address to Shannon.
Yes.
And I will give it to Katie Gibney and Sarah Cho, who are the people who are kind of developing the adult program and overseeing it in general. But every location has this program going, and I would like to make sure I get you to the right person.
Absolutely. So you can send that to me at s.penrod@autism-live.com, and I'll make sure that it gets where it's going. s.penrod, Penrod, @autism-live.com.